Hi, greetings. It's me, Dr. Paul Gerhardt, and the purpose of this video is to help you write a scholarly APA introduction to your research paper. So, if you've ever taken a class from me, you know that I'm really particular about doing effective APA writing. And so, after working with people with APA doing APA writing for the last 17 years, I wanted to create a quick video and show you some resources that I found that hopefully will help you become a more effective scholarly writer. I'm actually looking at the hamilton.edu website, and I like what the author of this page has written about APA introductions, and so I wanted to read it to you, then show you the sample from the Purdue OWL website that I like to use to help people really understand how to be more effective with their APA writing and research. So here's what this page says. It says, Introduction. Do not label as introduction. Title of the paper goes at the top of the page, not bold. So that's a really key insight is we know it's your introduction. Don't label it as introduction. It would be like saying, hey, this is the cover of your book. Cover. Putting cover on the cover. So remember, don't use introduction as the title of your paper. Introduction of an APA style paper is the most difficult to write. A good introduction will summarize, integrate, and critically evaluate the empirical knowledge in the relevant areas in a way that sets the stage for your study and why you conducted it. The introduction starts out broad, but not too broad, and gets more focused toward the end. Here are some guidelines for constructing a good introduction. I'm going to scroll down. Don't put your readers to sleep by beginning your paper with the time-worn sentence, past research has shown, blah, blah, blah. They'll be snoring within a paragraph. Try to draw your reader in by saying something interesting or thought-provoking right off the bat. Take a look at articles you've read. Which ones captured your attention right away? How did the authors accomplish this task? Which ones didn't? Why not? See if you can use articles you liked as a model. One way to begin, but not the only way, is to provide an example or anecdote illustrative of your topic area. Although you won't go into details of your study and hypothesis until the end of the intro, you should foreshadow your study a bit at the end of the first paragraph by stating your purpose briefly, to give your readers a schema for all the information you'll present next. So again, that's a really good tip. So you're not giving all the details of this study until the end of the intro. Scrolling down. Your intro should be a logical flow of ideas that leads up to your hypothesis. Try to organize it in terms of the ideas rather than who did what when. In other words, your intro shouldn't read like a story of Smerdley did such and such in 1991, then Gergelhoff did something or other in 1993, then etc. First, brainstorm all the ideas you think are necessary to include in your paper. Next, decide which ideas make sense to first or present first, second, third, and so forth. And think about how you want to transition between ideas. When an idea is complex, don't be afraid to use a real-life example to clarify it for your reader. The introduction will end with a brief overview of your study and finally your specific hypothesis. The hypothesis should flow logically out of everything that's been presented so that the reader has the sense of course, this hypothesis makes complete sense given all the other research that was presented. That's a cool idea. The introduction will, with We'll end with a brief overview of your study and finally your specific hypothesis. The hypothesis should flow logically out of everything that's been presented so that the reader has a sense of, of course, this hypothesis makes complete sense given all the other research that was presented. So yes, I just read that again because I think that's so important. Scrolling down. When incorporating references into your intro, you do not necessarily need to describe every single study in complete detail, particularly if different studies use similar methodologies. Certainly, you want to summarize briefly key articles, though, and point out differences in methods or findings of relevant studies when necessary. Don't make one mistake typical of a novice APA paper writer by stating overtly why you're including a particular order. Example, this article is relevant to my study because. It shouldn't be obvious to the reader why you're including a reference without your, or it should be obvious to the reader why you're including a reference without your explicitly stating so. So it really should be obvious to the reader why you're including a reference without your explicitly saying so. Do not quote from articles. Instead, paraphrase by putting your information in your own words. So here you go. Here's another example of someone else saying this very important thing. You need to be the author of your paper. Avoid using direct quotes. Direct quotes in papers are really good when you are saying, hey, Dr. Martin Luther King said this specific phrase. That's important because he's a notable character of history. But most things can be paraphrased in your own words. And so you're saying essentially, but you're not saying the words, hey, here's what I found in the literature. You simply talk about what you found in the literature in a way where you're still the author, but noting that these insights are also found by people who have done research in that area. So it should be obvious to the reader why you're including a reference without your explicitly saying so. Do not quote from the articles. Instead, paraphrase by putting the information in your own words. Be careful about citing your sources. See the APA manual. Make sure there is a one-to-one correspondence between articles you've cited in your intro and the articles listed in your reference. Remember that your audience is the broader scientific community, not the other students in your class or your professor. Therefore, you should assume that they have a basic understanding of psychology or whatever topic you're writing on. But you need to provide them with the complete information necessary for them to understand the research you are presenting. So it really is important to really think about who your audience is as you write. So again, this came from the hamilton.edu website from their Writing Center. And so you can find that by using Google, of course. And so let's take a look at the Purdue OWL sample paper that I like to use, found at the purdue.edu website using Google, the term APA sample paper PDF. I really like this paper again because it tells you what to do in the margins, and it also gives you a really good example. So if you haven't found that sample paper from the Purdue OWL website using Google, I highly suggest you do. You print it off and look at it often and compare your work to this excellent writing example. You notice at the very top of the page, you see the running head. It's all in caps, and that running head is a shorter version of your actual title. So if someone were to pick up the paper, they'll go, oh, I can tell just by looking at the running head what this is all about. And then you'll notice exactly 1 inch from the right end of the paper, you see the page number that's been put in there by using the Insert Page Number feature from Microsoft Word. Again, look at the title of this paper. The title of the paper is Varying Definitions of Online Communication and Their Effects on Relationship Research. And then you'll notice that the title of the paper is not bolded. So this very first level 1 heading kind of goes against what all the rest of the level 1 headings do. You'll notice right here it says their effects on relationship research. It's centered. It is not bold. And this thing here on the corner says the title of the paper is centered and not bolded. Over here on the other side, it says the title should be centered on the page, typed in 12-point Times New Roman font. It should not be bolded, underlined, or italicized. In green, it says the introduction presents the problem that the paper addresses. And then, of course, it says see the OWL resources on the introductions, and then it gives a URL which you could find using Google if you can't read this. And then on the other side of the margin, it says if an article has 3 to 5 authors, write out all of the authors' names the first time that they appear. Then use the first author's last name followed by et al. So I see a very commonly people often go, oh, I'm just going to start using et al. Right off the bat. And if it has more than 5 authors, then you can do that. But if it has less than 6 authors, you really need to list all of the authors out the very first time. And of course, if there are only 2 authors, you just list both authors. So let's see how the author of this Purdue OWL paper did on following the instructions that I just read to you from the other website, the Hamilton EDU website. So I'll read this to you and see how they did. This is their introduction paragraph. And so page 1 of this paper obviously was the cover page. Page 2 was the abstract. They didn't have a table of contents since this paper is a very short paper. So you don't always need a table of contents, especially if you've got a shorter paper. So you'll notice that this first paragraph is indented, and it starts out saying, numerous studies have been conducted on various facets of internet relationships, focusing on the levels of intimacy, closeness, different communication modalities, and the frequency of use of computer-mediated communications, CMC. And so you'll notice that it uses CMC in parentheses because that's going to be a term that they use throughout the paper. So they introduce the term computer-mediated communication, and then they show how they're going to shorten that throughout the paper. So when you see CMC, if you were to read this paper on, you would know that that means computer-mediated communication. So that was the first sentence. Nice, succinct. However, contradictory results are suggested within the research because only certain aspects of CMC are investigated, comma. For example, email only. Cummings, Butler, and Kraut, 2002, suggest that face-to-face, or FTF, interactions are more effective than CMC, read email, in creating feelings of closeness and intimacy, while other studies suggest the opposite. To understand how both online internet and offline non-internet relationships are affected by CMC, all forms of communication should be studied. This paper examines Cummings et al.'s research against CMC research to propose that additional research be conducted to better understand how online communications affects relationships. And so, as you read this paper, or this introduction of this paper, do you get a good idea of what this paper is going to be about? How was the tone of this introduction? Did it make you want to read more? I think it did. I think if you read this first paragraph, you would have a really good idea about what this paper should be. and it makes me want to go on and read more. You can see that they've given a citation right off the bat, and they have quickly shown how this paper is going to make a positive difference in what it's related to. So anyway, that in a nutshell is your introduction to introductions in APA writing. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I hope you find some value in it. Thank you so much. I'm Dr. Paul Gerhardt.